You are standing in a newspaper archive, dusty and dim, scanning headlines from the late 1800s. Your fingers stop. The ink is faded but the words are unmistakable. Giant human skeleton unearthed. 9 feet tall. Bones unlike any known race. You turn the page. Another headline. Then another. Dozens of them. From Ohio. From Minnesota. From Tennessee. All describing the same impossible thing. Enormous human remains pulled from burial mounds across America. Reported by local officials. Documented by county surveyors. Sent, according to some accounts, to the Smithsonian Institution. And then, silence. The bones disappear from the record. The reports are never followed up. And the Smithsonian, one of the world's most powerful repositories of human history, has no record of receiving them. So what happened? Were these reports fabricated? Were they misidentified? Or was something deliberately buried, not in the earth, but in the archive? To answer that question, you have to go somewhere most people have never heard of. A place that appeared on maps for 4 centuries and then, one day, simply vanished. A land stretching from the steppes of Central Asia to the frozen edge of the known world. You have to go to Tartaria. Pull out a map from the 1700s. Any major European map. Look at the vast interior of the Asian continent, the sweeping territory east of the Caspian Sea, north of China, west of the Pacific. You'll see it labeled in bold, confident lettering, Tartaria. Or Tartary. Sometimes Grand Tartary. It fills the map the way oceans fill the edges. It is enormous. It is real. And it is, today, almost entirely forgotten. But here's what matters: Tartaria was not a single nation. It was not an empire with a unified government or a capital city. European cartographers used the name as a geographic catch-all, a vast label for a region they understood imperfectly, populated by Turkic and Mongolic peoples who were neither fully charted nor fully conquered. The word itself derives from Tartar, the name Europeans gave to the nomadic groups who swept westward under Mongol expansion in the 13th century. The suffix evolved, the mythology grew, and cartographers stretched the label across the entire inner continent. By the 18th century, British encyclopedias were publishing detailed entries on Tartary, describing its territories, its peoples, its climate. It was taught in European schools. It appeared in diplomatic correspondence. It was, in every measurable sense, considered real. So why did it disappear? As Russia expanded eastward through Siberia and as China consolidated control over Central Asia, the political map changed. The vague geographic label of Tartary was replaced by actual administrative borders. The Qing dynasty. The Russian Empire. The Ottoman sphere. The broad term was no longer necessary. The land didn't vanish, it was simply renamed, divided, and redrawn. This is documented history. And if this were the whole story, Tartaria would simply be a footnote in the evolution of cartography. But what was living there? Here is where the documented record ends and something stranger begins. Across the ancient steppe, the burial traditions of nomadic peoples left behind enormous earthen mounds called kurgans. Thousands of them still dot the landscape from Eastern Europe to Mongolia. Inside these mounds, archaeologists have found skeletons, weapons, jewelry, and evidence of complex cultural practices stretching back more than 5,000 years. The Scythians, one of the dominant peoples of the Eurasian steppe, were described by Greek historians as fierce, tall, and otherworldly. Herodotus wrote of them with a mixture of fascination and fear. Later legends amplified these descriptions. Medieval European accounts of the Mongol invasions painted the warriors of the East as something barely human, enormous, unstoppable, seemingly immune to fear. Legends are not evidence. But legends do not appear from nothing. Here is where the story connects to those newspaper headlines you read in the archive. If this mystery has gripped you, hit subscribe, because what comes next challenges everything you thought you knew about forgotten history. Throughout the 19th century, as American settlers expanded westward and began excavating the burial mounds of the Mississippi Valley and the Great Plains, newspaper reports of unusual skeletal remains became increasingly common. The Smithsonian's Bureau of Ethnology documented thousands of mound excavations in their 1894 report, a meticulous, published record. It described large skeletons, double rows of teeth, skulls with unusual cranial shapes. But the report also explained them. These were the remains of indigenous peoples, often distorted by burial practices, soil conditions, and the inexperience of amateur excavators. Bones shift. Skulls compress. A 9-foot giant, measured hastily by a farmer with a rope, often becomes a 6'2" individual under careful examination. The Smithsonian report is publicly available. It does not describe giants. It does describe misidentification, folklore, and the very human tendency to find the extraordinary in the unfamiliar. And yet, the gap between the newspaper reports and the institutional silence is real. Why did so many local officials file reports, only for those reports to vanish? Why are the original specimens from certain mound excavations impossible to locate today? These are genuine questions. They deserve serious answers, not easy dismissal. The theory that giant history was deliberately erased is a modern framework, one that emerged largely in the late 20th century and accelerated through internet communities in the 2000s. Its central argument is this, that a race of giant humans once inhabited the ancient world, that their remains have been found across multiple continents, and that powerful institutions have systematically suppressed this knowledge because it would overturn established archaeology and potentially challenge religious or evolutionary narratives. The appeal of this argument is understandable. It gives meaning to the gaps. It turns silence into evidence. But historians and archaeologists point to a different explanation. The 19th-century newspaper industry operated without fact-checking standards. Sensational stories about giant skeletons sold papers. Some reports were genuine misidentifications. Some were outright fabrications. Many specimens were lost not through conspiracy but through the chaos of pre-institutional archaeology. Collections moved, mislabeled, deteriorated, or simply discarded. The absence of evidence, historians remind us, is not the same as evidence of absence. Pause here and ask yourself what you believe. Then tell me in the comments, because this debate is older than the internet, and it shows no signs of settling. What is provable is this: the steppe peoples of Central Asia, the Scythians, the Xiongnu, the early Turkic confederacies, left behind a physical and cultural legacy that European civilization barely understood and frequently mythologized. The word Tartaria became a container not just for geography but for everything unfamiliar, oversized, and threatening that existed beyond the known world. Giants, in almost every ancient culture, are not simply tall people. They are metaphors for the incomprehensible. For the civilization that came before. For the power that could not be explained. If you've been with this story from the beginning, leave a like. The final piece of this puzzle is the one that changes everything. Here is what the evidence actually shows. Tartaria was a real geographic concept, used consistently on European maps from the 13th to the 19th century, and then dissolved not by conspiracy but by the advance of geopolitical borders. The giant skeleton reports of the 19th century were real newspaper stories, but they exist in a context of known journalistic fabrication, archaeological misidentification, and institutional disorganization that explains most, though perhaps not all, of their disappearance from the official record. The Smithsonian has been accused of suppressing evidence. A 2004 satirical article on the website World News Daily Report, a known fiction site, claimed the Smithsonian had admitted to destroying thousands of giant skeletons. This article was widely shared as fact. It was not fact. The kurgans of the Eurasian steppe do contain remarkable remains of remarkable people. Some were tall. Some were warriors of extraordinary physical development. None have been confirmed to exceed 8 feet in height. The legends, however, persist. And this is perhaps the most honest thing that can be said about all of it. Human beings have always stood at the edge of the known world and imagined something larger than themselves on the other side. Tartaria was that edge for centuries. The burial mounds were that edge for 19th century America. And perhaps the real question is not whether giants existed, but why we need them to have existed. What does it mean that every culture, in every era, tells the same story about enormous beings who came before? What does it mean that the places where those beings were supposedly found are always just beyond the reach of verification? And what does it mean that we keep digging, not just in the earth, but in the archive, in the map, in the headline, searching for something that might already be there, waiting to be seen clearly for the very first time? Maybe history erased nothing at all. Maybe we simply see what we expect to see. Or maybe somewhere beneath forgotten soil, a story still waits to be uncovered.